or live action roleplay. Live action roleplay is basically impersonating a different character in a different setting than normal. The setting of the LARP that I was just demonstrating was a fantasy medieval setting. Now, the beginnings of LARP began at the very beginning of civilization, when armies would have war games to train the new soldiers. But today's LARPs began in about the 18th century, and it began from role-play games such as Dungeons and Dragons. Now, Europe, North America, and Australia, both simultaneously and independently, had their own LARPs. But each of these LARPs had about slightly different settings. The European LARPs were more medieval fantasy-based, which is what Last Hope, the LARP that I do, is based more off of. Now, there are 10,000 LARPers in the world today, and the largest LARPs are in Europe, in Germany. These two LARPs are Conquest of Mythodea and Drachenfest. There's also a very large LARP in Canada called Vico Line, and LARP isn't real popular in America, but the largest LARP in the United States is probably Nero, and there are also Belgarth and Edgard, which are more combat-oriented LARPs. But the LARP that I do is Last Hope LARP, which is a very new LARP, having started only in July. And that's what I'm going to be explaining today, is about how you fight and a little bit about the actual events of Last Hope. Now, the main thing is to know how to attack. Basically, for Last Hope, you use medium contact, which means that you pull your blows, because these weapons do have hard cores and can hit pretty hard if you don't pull your blows. And also, with every single attack, you need to break a 90-degree plane, which means with every attack, you need to bring back the sword past this point. So every single time you fight, you need to pull your arm back past that point. Next, you need to know how to take hits. Every single time you hit somebody, it does 1 point of damage. Now, by wearing armor, you can have armor points. I have 4 armor points by wearing this chainmail, which means I can get hit 4 times before my armor is gone, and I progress to hit points. Now, hit points are basically the small scratches and bruises that you acquire during battle. And after you lose your hit points, you start to gain light wounds. You can get a light wound in every single limb, but if you get hit twice in one limb, it progresses to a mortal wound. Once you're mortally wounded, you fall to the ground, you can't fight anymore, but you can still call for help and pull yourself along. After 5 minutes of being mortally wounded, you progress to dying. Once you are dying, you have 5 minutes of just laying there, bleeding out, hoping somebody comes and revives you until you die. Now, there are certain weapons that do special types of damage. One of these weapons are bows. Bows have the ability called piercing. Now, no matter how armored you have, a bow can pierce your armor, which means that if you get hit with a bow, you immediately have a light wound. Now, you cannot progress a light wound to a mortal wound with a bow on any of the limbs except for the torso. If you already have a light wound in the torso and you get hit again with a bow, you are mortally wounded. The other special weapon is two-handed cleaving weapons. Now, cleaving weapons can cleave through shields. Depending on the size of your shield, you may take more hits to your shield before it is cleaved. My shield will take 3 hits before it is cleaved. Larger shields will take 4 or 5 hits. Now, to cleave a shield, basically all you do is announce cleave before you hit the shield, and you really roleplay a lot of force behind the attack. So you cleave, 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 and then the person has to drop their shield. So that's a bit about the fighting of Last Hope. Now, in an actual event, you would create a character before the event. When you create a character, you have to decide on the race and the class. There are 3 main races to Last Hope. There are humans, Ulven, which are kind of werewolf type of people, and there are also Sindars, which are basically elves. You also need to decide which class your character is going to be in. There are 4 main classes. There are mages, which use arcane magic, which are basically evil spells that do damage to your opponents. There are clerics, which basically do good magic, which are like healing spells, protection spells. And there are also rogues and warriors. Now, in an actual event, you would roleplay a lot more, which means that every time you get hit, you'd roleplay with the force of the attack, and you would roleplay with the other characters. You would basically be your character for the duration of the event. So, if this sounds interesting to you, and if you're interested in a unique, very, very active hobby, you should visit LastHopeLARP.com to learn more about Last Hope, or just look on the internet to learn more about LARPs in general, because it really is a very interesting hobby and has a lot of historical significance.